Good evening from Lombok, everyone. It's Anifa Menon from hearthealthbrainhealth.com, encouraging healthy grieving and mindful actions. Today, I thought I'd make a video about shadow work. And shadow work is an idea and process that was brought forward by a psychologist named Carl Jung. And I thought, for those of you who haven't heard of this term or don't understand it, I'd read this quotation to you, or this description to you. It says, shadow work is the process of acknowledging and integrating the unconscious parts of oneself, often called the shadow self, which includes repressed emotions, fears, and desires. Repressed emotions, fears, and desires. Now, a lot of times, when people hear the word shadow, it's almost a little bit scary. It sounds shadowy. It sounds dark, and it is. It's dark and light. And so we can imagine that even when we're standing in the light, there is a shadow behind us, and it's our shadow. So each of us has a shadow, or some shadows, and we can say that this is or I can say that, to me, this quotation, I hope, inspires you to begin this work. This quotation is by Carl Jung, and it says, shadow work is the path of the heart warrior. Shadow work is the path of the heart warrior. Now, heart warrior, that's strength. I've got strength. And you think of the heart, and oftentimes the things that we're not so proud of, whether it's something we're guilty about, whether it's jealousy, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, or whether it's my focus of work in Canada for sure, and something that I carry with me in terms of my understanding of humans, is grief work. So grief also is part of the shadow for a lot of people. So if a grief has happened recently, it doesn't feel like such a shadow. It seems so easy to cry in front of a friend or a family member or in an office even. It all makes sense that it's just happened. They're very upset. But if 10 years from the time that a significant grief happened, you're crying about that grief, it will feel like a shadow, and it will be perceived as something, I shouldn't share this, I should hide this, I should be over this by now. And this is the same thing for things like desires and fears, that people are aware of their own desires and fears, and oftentimes are not encouraged to talk about them. I was thinking about an example that here in Indonesia, and I'll say largely in Lombok compared to Bali, because Lombok is like most of Indonesia, which is largely Muslim, and there is a strong recommendation, suggestion, or Islamic direction to not drink. And yet many do drink alcohol, that is. Now it's interesting because almost every religion actually sees this, that don't do anything in excess, so alcohol often falls into those things of excess. And in North America, I know that alcohol is a significant concern as well. And it's one of those things that a person can talk about with a friend. They might say the little outs that at least the Christmas party, it's only the Christmas party, you know that Christmas is coming up soon. So I know that there will be lots of parties at that time. There are parties here too, so there's different things that people celebrate. And then there's grief itself, which often can lead to people drinking or using substances to overcome emotions, sometimes emotions of fear. Someone is doing a public lecture and they're very fearful of getting out on a stage. They might say, someone might even tell them, have a drink and calm your nerves before you get out there. And then we move that into, take this anxiety pill and then get out there. Sometimes people cry easily for different reasons because of a grief that's unresolved, and we've treated it with antidepressants. And this is, again, a pattern that is happening throughout the world. From what I have seen in my work, my life experience, personal and collective, I see that this is such an important area for people to look at. And oftentimes if someone has done a little bit of work in shadow work, they feel they're done. That's all they need to do. They dealt with this thing, and it's much deeper than that. So the more we look at some aspects of ourselves carefully, is the deeper we go into the understanding of ourselves. When we understand ourselves better, we help to make our interactions easier because of that self-understanding. And that automatically helps us understand others too. Because my own patterns of emotions are not that different from yours, though the reasons for those patterns might be very different. I did lose a brother. You might have lost a spouse. You might have lost a job, and I've lost a job. I have lost a pet, and you might have lost a pet. So all of these things, now that's grief. That sounds very obvious in terms of actual loss. Then there could be the loss of confidence. There could be the loss of faith. So all of these things come up, and then they become part of a shadow. So if someone has loss of faith, and yet any community that they're staying in or a family is really strong about a particular faith, there will be this subtle pressure, sometimes a stronger pressure. Here it might be to go to mosque. In Canada it was to go to church, and especially at least Christmas and Easter. So those sorts of conditions were placed by families. And then even if a child was not doing that anymore, there was a subtle pressure from either a family or a collective group, a community. It could be an extended family, it could be an extended society. And so this turns into a shadow for an individual, and very important for us to see what are we doing to ourselves and to others, because a person going through that experience looks at themselves with that shadow of, I should be going to whichever institution more regularly, and then they'll judge others from the same eye too. And this doesn't help us encourage compassion and understanding, which in this perspective, this mind's perspective, is so important personally and professionally, that if we're coming from a space of compassion and understanding, we help one another, and it starts with helping ourselves understand ourselves. So then I thought the next quotation that I would love to share with you is by Virginia Woolf. It says, "A light here required a shadow there. A light here required a shadow there." Now when I see someone going through a shadow experience, so today, for example, I was speaking with someone who had lost a friend and wasn't sure exactly how that person passed, but thought maybe from alcohol. That was just the instinctive thought that maybe alcohol. Now, as I said here, alcohol is not encouraged yet, like the whole world. Many people get into addictions of various sorts to feel easier, to allow an ease of the mind or body, or perceived ease of the mind or body. And so when that happened, one can see that if someone had the same concern, that shadow is part of them. When that happens and they're not in that shadow space, a light can be seen. That, oh, I'm so glad I'm not going to do that. Whatever it is, when we see a shadow in another, it brings a light to ourselves of, wow, this person's lying, yet I say the truth. So sometimes it's much easier to see our own light or someone else's light when we've got the comparison of the shadow. So it takes a shadow there to see the light here. And this is so useful for us to understand, because then we can actually appreciate those that can bring shadows into our lives, or ourselves who have gone through our own shadows that are now coming to light. There is another quotation that's very similar. It says, "There are dark shadows on the earth, but its lights are stronger in the contrast." There are dark shadows on the earth, but its lights are stronger in contrast. So same idea. If we see when we are not helping one another and something happens, as some tragedy, and there's lots of different types of tragedies, which I'm sure I don't have to bring to your attention at all, and suddenly it brings out this huge humanitarian effort to help, whether it's help getting food to people, whether it's to help in healthcare, whether it's to help comfort people, whether it's societies that look divided coming together in any way. Excuse me. Those are the lights that are stronger in the contrast. So it's so interesting that oftentimes we humans go through these cycles again and again, that until I have a contrast, I I don't know how to be the light. And suddenly, when a contrast comes along, I really recognize the light. I am the light, and you are the light too. And sometimes we need the contrast to remind us exactly who we are or who we're choosing to be. I wanted to finish also because, again, here, there's a lot of communication that is focused on language and English. And again, this whole idea of if we understand English, we'll be able to get to a school in a different country and our prospects will be better. And that may or may not be true. But do you know that when we're speaking, oftentimes it's the space between words that tell the most? So you ask someone a question and they hesitate. And that hesitation tells you so much. And I can tell you part of my whole journey, certainly in Indonesia, but prior to getting here, is by exactly that perception. And I suspect that it wouldn't take any language for us to understand, even when someone hesitates about something. Sorry, let me move this camera so that I can share this last quotation with you and read it properly to you. It says, "We think not in words, but in shadows of words." We think not in words, but in shadows of words. What does that mean? It's again, a lot of times what's not spoken or what's kind of suggested. It tells us a lot more than the words are saying. So you ask someone if they had a good day, and they say, yeah. But you know that yeah didn't really mean that they had a good day. Or they say, yeah, I did, it was so great. It's different. It's their mannerism. It's a different energy. And we know that those are the shadows. They didn't have to say anything. It's like they didn't even have to tell what happened. It could be that you're speaking on the phone and it's like, I can't wait to get back to tell you about what happened. So that's just a shadow. I don't really know what happened, but they're so happy. Or, I want to talk to you, and yeah, it's been quite a day. And we know they haven't said any particular word, yet we know there's something not easy going on. Over time, I'm going to share a little bit more about this journey and what has allowed me to really zone in on things that are not spoken, the energies of people, the love and compassion that is within us and around us, and often the shadow aspects that cover that up. So today, I would love for us all to think about shadow and light, recognize that both are needed to actually recognize each other, and each of those is within each of us. We need to understand it within ourselves first before we point fingers at anyone else of, oh, well, that's your shadow. That's the thing that you don't talk about to anyone. It's for us to understand ourselves, to build our compassion, and remember that this is a human tendency that we are all so lucky and fortunate to carry. I'll say it's the divine spark within us, and yet it's carried in these human forms. Today, I hope that you will look for the shadow and light within yourself to recognize, acknowledge, accept, and recognize that work has to be, or is encouraged to be, done to look at these things without judgment, with compassion, with love and acceptance for yourself first. And let's allow that healing to spread from you to the world around us. I wish you a fantastic day or night ahead, and I hope you remember, transform your mind and transform your life. Have a great day or night, everyone.